In the basement archive of the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna, tucked inside a flat drawer cabinet beside two plaster casts of Ptolemaic column bases, there is a set of photographs. They were taken in the autumn of 1976 by Austrian author and researcher Peter Krassa during a documentation visit to the Hathor Temple at Dendera, Egypt. Most of the photographs are unremarkable. Columns, cartouches, procession reliefs, the kind you find in every Egyptology textbook. But there is one photograph in the sequence that almost no one discusses. It shows a section of carved stone wall inside a sealed underground chamber, South Crypt 1C of the Hathor Temple, recorded in French survey records as Crypt 4. The carving looks ordinary at first. A human figure in profile, a lotus flower at the base, and rising from that lotus, enclosed inside an elongated oval vessel, a serpent stretches horizontally, not coiled, not rearing, not threatening anyone, but suspended and extended along the interior length of the container like a filament inside a glass tube. Most people walk right past it, but hidden inside it is something that shouldn't exist. Because the shape of that vessel, its proportions, its sealed dual-tapered ends, the stretched luminous form inside it, matches almost exactly the profile of a late 19th century Crookes tube. The glass vacuum device that Thomas Edison studied in the years before he built his first filament lamp. The device that first demonstrated that ionized gas, sealed inside a glass envelope and exposed to high voltage, produces a glowing discharge that looks exactly like a snake. Not similar, not inspired by it, the same. And this carving was made over 2,000 years ago. Not a myth, not a metaphor, a precise image carved into stone inside a sealed chamber, depicting a device that Western science did not formally describe until 1875. This channel goes where the evidence leads, no matter how uncomfortable the destination. If that's the kind of investigation you came here for, subscribe now, because this one goes all the way to the bottom. The Hathor Temple at Dendera, Egypt, sits at coordinates 26 degrees 8 minutes north, 32 degrees 40 minutes east, approximately 60 kilometers north of Luxor along the Nile's western bank. Construction of the current complex began in the late Ptolemaic period around 54 BCE and continued into the Roman era. The temple is remarkable for many reasons, but its most unusual feature is what lies beneath it. 6 sealed subterranean chambers cut directly beneath the main sanctuary floor, accessible only through concealed shaft openings built into the temple walls. Hidden rooms that most visitors to the site never enter and never see. German Egyptologist Wolfgang Waitkus spent years analyzing the crypt inscriptions for his 1997 doctoral dissertation at the University of Göttingen. It remains the most thorough academic treatment of the crypt texts in the scholarly literature. Waitkus concluded that the chambers functioned as underground sanctuaries, storage rooms for cult statues and sacred instruments that were activated through ritual transport to the temple rooftop, where they could receive direct contact with sunlight and starlight. For decades, scholars dismissed the imagery as symbolic. The objects in the carvings were identified as representations of Harsamptus, a form of Horus, depicted as a serpent deity emerging from a lotus flower inside a ritual vessel called an NHN. The hin, in standard Egyptological analysis, is a protective container, an oval womb symbol representing the primordial darkness from which divinity is born. The Djed pillar appearing beside the scene is the backbone of Osiris. The lotus is the first moment of creation. The serpent is divine generative energy rising into being. All metaphor, all mythology. The case, as far as the mainstream was concerned, was closed. Here's where it gets strange. The first clue is the object itself. In the Dendera crypt reliefs, the Han vessel is not depicted the way any other An vessel appears anywhere else in Egypt. The canonical HNA is round, jar-shaped, sealed at the top with a small opening. used in offering contexts and storage. The Dendera version is dramatically elongated, approximately 3 times as long as it is wide, sealed at both ends, tapered toward one end and bulbous toward the other. The inscriptions accompanying the carvings record the vessel's dimensions in a range from 3 palms to 1 cubit, depending on the specific panel, roughly 22 to 50 centimeters. The figures holding it extend it horizontally between their hands, not in a ritual presentation pose, but in the practical, two-handed grip of someone holding a tool. The mainstream says this is a variant lotus serpent motif, symbolically appropriate to the crypt's cosmological function. But that explanation has a problem. Across the entire known corpus of Egyptian art, 3,000 years of continuous artistic production across dozens of excavation sites, no HN vessel appears in this elongated, sealed, dual-tapered form anywhere else. Not at Karnak, not at Luxor, not at Abydos, not in any papyrus, tomb wall, or temple pillar from the Old Kingdom through the Roman period. The shape at Dendera is unique. It appears only in these crypts, and it appears not once, but across multiple carved panels in consistent proportions, with the same horizontal serpent in the same stretched floating posture in every single instance. The second clue is the Djed pillar. In the Dendera crypt panels, the Djed does not appear as a decorative border or a simple symbol of Osirian stability. In the most complete panel sequence, it appears at the base of the elongated HN vessel connected to it by a cord, a carved line running from the base of the pillar directly to the base of the vessel. The Djed pillar, in standard Egyptian symbolism, is a column with horizontal banded rings near its capital. It appears thousands of times across 3 millennia of Egyptian art. It is always symbolic, always funerary. It is never shown connected by a cord to any adjacent object in any other context in the entire Egyptian decorative tradition. Except here, researchers in the electrical engineering community noted in the late 1990s and into the 2000s that the Djed's distinctive structure, a vertical insulating column with horizontal banding along its upper portion, is functionally identical to a high-voltage transmission insulator. The ceramic or glass discs stacked along modern power line towers, designed to prevent electrical current from grounding through the pole, are horizontally banded vertical columns. Engineers have built them in exactly this form for over a century, for purely functional reasons derived from the physics of electrical insulation. And only at Dendera does the Djed appear with a cord running from it to a sealed vessel containing a glowing filament. The third clue is the darkness. This is the one that does not have a comfortable answer. The Dendera crypts are sealed underground chambers with no windows, no chimney shafts, no light wells, and ceiling heights averaging 1.9 meters. They are not decorative spaces. The carvings inside them are among the most technically precise in the entire temple complex. Small figures, detailed hieroglyphic inscriptions, fine relief work that required sustained, close, high-quality illumination. In every working chamber in Egypt, where standard oil lamps were used for extended periods, combustion residue is present on the ceilings and upper walls. Carbon soot from tallow and oil lamps. Egyptologists use this residue as a usage indicator. In heavily worked spaces, like the corridors of the Valley of the Kings, soot deposits can be dense enough to obscure original painted surfaces. The Dendera crypts show no detectable soot, not a trace, not a smear. The ceilings are clean. Now, in 1996, Krassa and his collaborator Reinhard Habeck published their full research in a book titled Das Licht der Pharaonen, The Light of the Pharaohs. It detailed not only their photographic documentation of the crypt reliefs, but a practical reconstruction experiment. An Austrian engineer working with their research built a functional scale model of the Dendera HN vessel using the carved proportions as a template. Glass, sealed ends filled with an inert noble gas at low pressure. When connected to an electrostatic high-voltage source, the plasma discharge inside the glass model reproduced the shape of the carved serpent with striking accuracy. The stretched, thread-like column of glowing ionized gas matched the Dendera carving in posture, taper, and position. They weren't guessing. They were recording. The response from the archaeological establishment was predictable. The work was not published in a peer-reviewed Egyptological journal. The mainstream consensus, as articulated by archaeologist Kenneth Feder and others, remained firm. No physical evidence of electrical apparatus, no glass shards, no metal sockets, no conductive components, has ever been recovered from the Dendera site or from any other Egyptian context. Without physical hardware, there is no case. The crypt itself is not open to standard visitors. Access to South Crypt 1C requires a separate permit from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. It does not appear on the standard Dendera visitor route. There is no signage directing tourists toward it. Most people who travel to Dendera spend their entire visit in the main hypostyle hall beneath the famous zodiac ceiling, not realizing that the original zodiac ceiling was removed to Paris in 1820 and now sits in the Musée du Louvre. What they see on the ceiling is a reproduction. The real thing left Egypt 200 years ago. It was sealed, it was mapped, and then it was moved. But the Dender carvings are not alone in suggesting that someone in the ancient world had observed electrical phenomena at close range. In 1938, German archaeologist Wilhelm König, working through a collection at the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, identified a ceramic vessel that had been recovered years earlier from the Parthian-era site of Kujut Rabu, southeast of the city. Inside the vessel was a copper cylinder containing a central iron rod, sealed at the top with bitumen. König recognized the configuration immediately. The vessel was a galvanic cell, a battery, filled with an acidic liquid, vinegar, wine, or citric solution. It would generate a measurable electrical current through the electrochemical interaction of the copper and iron in the acidic medium. In 1999, engineers at the Smithsonian Institution built a functional replica to the original specifications. It produced 1.5 volts of steady current. The Baghdad Battery dates to approximately 250 BCE. The Hathor Temple at Dendera was completed around 54 BCE. The same two-century historical window, the same arc of civilization connecting Mesopotamia to the Nile Valley. And in that window, at least one documented culture had the practical, tested, functional ability to generate electricity from simple materials. And if that's true, it means our history is missing a chapter. Now, does this prove the most extreme interpretation of the Dendera story? That the ancient Egyptians built functioning plasma lamps and powered underground temples with electricity? Probably not. The evidence is circumstantial. The Kraksa-Habeck reconstruction is an interesting experimental demonstration, not a proof. Kenneth Feder's point stands. There are no electrical components in the archaeological record from Egypt, and the absence of soot in the Dendera crypts does have a mainstream explanation worth hearing. Ancient papyrus records, recovered from Deir el-Medina, the village of craftsmen who built the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, document daily lamp oil rations for underground workers. They received measured quantities of oil for interior illumination, and castor oil, unlike animal tallow, burns with significantly reduced soot output under controlled airflow conditions. It is chemically possible that highly refined vegetable oil lamps, carefully managed in the low airflow environment of a sealed crypt, left minimal detectable residue. That explanation is real. It is documented. It should be taken seriously. But here is what it cannot explain. It cannot explain the vessel. It cannot explain the Djed connected by a cord. It cannot explain why the most technically precise carving in the Dendera crypt complex, the panel sequence that took the longest to make and demanded the most careful, sustained illumination, depicts an object with no parallel in 3,000 years of Egyptian artistic tradition, in proportions that match a device not described by Western science until the 19th century. The castor oil lamp solves one mystery while leaving a stranger one in its place. What the Dendera evidence points toward, in its most grounded and conservative interpretation, is not necessarily that the Egyptians built electric lights. It is that someone, in the Ptolemaic period, in the underground chambers of the Hathor Temple, far from any scribal academy or official narrative, had observed the behavior of ionized gas inside a sealed vessel, had noted the role of a vertically insulated column in the system, had recorded those observations in durable material with precise proportions, and repeated them across multiple carved panels in a sealed room no casual visitor would ever enter. That is not religious expression. That is documentation. The carvings at Dendera are still there. The South Crypt 1C still exists beneath the temple floor. The serpent still floats inside its sealed, elongated vessel. The Djed pillar still stands, connected by its carved cord at the base of the object. The ceiling above it is still clean. Whatever lit this room while those carvings were being made, it didn't burn. And 2,000 years later, we are still standing in the doorway, trying to figure out what it was. If this investigation changed the way you see the ancient world, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next video goes into a sealed chamber discovered beneath the Saqqara Plateau in 2018 that has still not been publicly opened. Same question, completely different evidence. You'll want to see where that one leads.